The Jets and Falcons are two teams having a disappointing season, but one of them is going to get a much-needed victory this Sunday at MetLife Stadium. We'll break down the paths to victories for the Jets and Falcons on today's Locked On Crossover Show.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, Jets fans and Falcons fans. I'm John Metchie, the host of Locked On Jets, alongside Aaron Freeman, the host of Locked On Falcons, here to get you ready for Sunday's game between the Jets and the Falcons. Before we get started, I'd like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and let you know that Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Well, Aaron, great to be with you today. I think when the schedule came out, we both hoped our teams would be in better shape than they are, but it is Thanksgiving weekend, so, a lot to be excited about.
Yeah, definitely lots of things to be thankful for in life. Maybe not necessarily on the football field with either one of these two teams, but we'll get into some of those things, right?
So what are the big stories in Atlanta this week around the Falcons?
Well, I think the big story right now, when you look at big picture stuff with the Falcons, they snapped their 5-game losing streak last week against the Saints on the road. And can they make it kind of 2 in a row and at least get back into a position where, the in the hunt playoff graphic that they show every Sunday from here on out, the Falcons can just sneak onto that graphic. That has potential ramifications. A big talking point over the last few weeks has been, is this current regime headed by head coach Raheem Morris and general manager Terry Fontenot, are they on their way out based off of the disappointing year that this season has been? And if they can sort of get into the mix, get back into the division race, although again, the Bucs have like the second easiest schedule the rest of the way, and they have the tiebreaker currently. But if the Falcons can pad and stack a few wins here, maybe they can, at least make the Bucs sweat a little bit down the stretch. And is that going to be enough for the ownership to basically say, okay, let's run it back with Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot in 2026? And obviously, that's a big ramification. So this game kind of is important for the Falcons and this coaching staff and job security, that they kind of have to win this game against an ailing Jets team if they want to have really any shot to try to save their jobs.
It's funny because the Jets are kind of at the opposite end of the cycle right now. This is a first-year head coach, a first-year general manager, and a team that has gotten very young. As I'm sure Falcons fans know, the Jets spent 2023 and 2024 loading up around big names. They tried to make a run with Aaron Rodgers, and it did not work out. And this is kind of the reset year that needed to happen. Now, even if the Jets had been successful in the Rodgers era, everybody acknowledged at the point they made the trade that 2025 was going to be a tough year because they borrowed a lot of resources. They borrowed a lot of future cap space. They traded a lot of draft picks to try and make it happen in the short term around Rodgers. And I think this year's been a little tougher than most Jets fans were hoping for. And of course, at the trade deadline, they were very active. They made deals involving 2 of their star players. They traded Quinnen Williams to Dallas for a first-round pick and a second-round pick, and Sauce Gardner to Indianapolis for a pair of first-round picks. So the Jets team has really just kind of torn it all down. And in many ways, Aaron, it's all about focusing on the future. The offseason is going to be very exciting this year when the Jets have a lot of cap space, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and next year when a lot of the dead money for guys like Aaron Rodgers, CJ Mosley, other players comes off the books, and the Jets will have 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick. But last 6 games, the Jets certainly want to win. They're certainly going to go out and compete, trying, all the typical first-year stuff about trying to establish a culture applies, but it's really about the future right now for this team. It's even more focused on the future than we thought it would be at the start of the season, because nobody really was expecting the Jets to be as active selling off their top players for draft picks as they were at the trade deadline.
Yeah. I definitely went into the season not expecting big things from the Jets, but I thought they would be feisty in large part due to some of the talent they had on the defensive side of the ball and some of the things they potentially could do offensively in the run game. And it's just interesting to sort of see the Jets situation. And there's a world where the Falcons are kind of headed for that type of season next year. Should they make a coaching change? Should they basically, Kirk Cousins is our Aaron Rodgers in terms of, the big splash move that the Falcons made. And with Michael Penix tearing his ACL and that putting a question on, his future as the Falcons' potential franchise quarterback next year. Like, are the Falcons headed to that type of reset year that is going to be a bitter pill to swallow? And obviously, all the people in the building are like, no, because we want to keep our jobs and keep this thing rolling. So it is interesting to sort of see that situation with the Jets right now. And obviously, hoping to come out of it better. And we'll see what direction the Falcons are headed for the rest of the season.
So, as you alluded to, Michael Penix Jr. is injured, so that means Kirk Cousins will be starting this game. I was wondering if you've noticed any differences in the way the offense has functioned since Cousins took over as the starter again.
Oh, it's night and day different, John. The Falcons got under center last week. They're a normal NFL offense rather than running pretty much their entire offense out of pistol and shotgun, which they had done under Michael Penix and did primarily last year when Kirk Cousins was a starter, as well as when Penix came in late in the season. But this past week, they got into a more traditional under center offense. They ran the majority of their offense from under center after pretty much doing it less than like 10% of the time prior to that. They ran a lot more play action, which has not been something that they have utilized a lot. All of these things are sort of classic staples of the Kirk Cousins' offenses that when you go back to his days in Washington and Minnesota, that's the type of offenses that they were running there. And it was a little bit surprising last year when they didn't run that here in Atlanta to sort of tailor it to Kirk Cousins. Some of that's owed to him coming off the Achilles injury and not being able to move as much and being able to, do some of the bootleg stuff. He's a little bit healthier. He's still quite a bit of statue in the pocket, but at least he's not like to the point where it's like, oh, we can't run a functional NFL offense like it was at various points last year. And so that has been the biggest change, and it'll be interesting to sort of see if that is going to just be the Falcons' offensive identity for the rest of the season, or if that was just more of a one-off against the Saints. And so that's going to be a big question heading into this game.
And the Jets have made their own quarterback change. Last week, Tyrod Taylor took over in the starting lineup for Justin Fields. And I do think there have also been changes in the Jets offense. Tyrod's mobile, but he's not a guy you're going to create a lot of designed runs for the way you would have with Fields. I think with Tyrod, the mobility is more in the scramble game when things break down. With Fields, I spent the offseason saying I understood why the Jets did it. Somebody had to play quarterback. There really weren't good options. It just has not worked. He started off with a fantastic game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then in the Jets' first win of the season, he lit it up against the Cincinnati Bengals. But at other points this season, it's not just that it's been a struggle. Fields has been indecisive to the point where the Jets have not been able to run a functional NFL offense, and where he's just too hesitant to throw the ball. And, in the NFL, windows close quickly. And if you're hesitant, trying to avoid making a bad decision, that is a bad decision. There was a game in London against Denver where Fields took 9 sacks, and most of them were on him. Most of them were not on the offensive line. It got to a point where the Jets really had no choice but to make a change. Now, Fields, when he's on, is dynamic. I mean, he's a playmaker. He puts a lot of big plays on the table. I don't know that Tyrod Taylor really gives you the chance to have an explosive offense, but you're seeing last week against Baltimore. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was not a great offensive performance for the Jets. They put 10 points on the board, but you at least saw basic plays executed in a way that unfortunately wasn't happening with Fields under center. So I think with the Jets offense, this is very much a case where the ceiling is higher with Tyrod Taylor, but the ceiling is lower, but the floor is higher.
Yeah. That seems to be the vibe I sort of get. And Falcon fans have experienced both ends of the spectrum when they've played Justin Fields over the last several years, where it's been, oh, this guy can't run a functional NFL offense, and this guy's making every throw on the field and single-handedly killing the Falcons. And I'm glad we don't have to deal with, well, we'll see what happens in the game. But, going into this game, I think that plays to the Falcons' favor, that volatility of, which version of Justin Fields is going to show up is kind of an X factor for a team like the Jets, rather than Tyrod, who, is competent, but also not particularly good at this stage in his career. And so that makes the Jets offense, I think, a little bit more predictable and easier to game plan for the Falcons.
All right. Well, you've heard the big stories around these two teams. Here on our Locked On crossover show, we're going to break down the key matchups that could determine whether the Jets or the Falcons get a win on this Thanksgiving weekend. Today's Crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Jets and Locked On Falcons is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. You can also get into the NFL action on FanDuel. Aaron, I know the Falcons are having a rough season, but they are 2.5-point road favorites right now over the Jets at MetLife Stadium. I don't think many Jets fans would disagree with that either. Jets team having a really rough time this year. Again, you want to get in on the action, FanDuel is the place to do it. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Happy Thanksgiving. It is Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, alongside my colleague Aaron Freeman, the host of Locked On Falcons, getting you ready for Sunday's action. The Atlanta Falcons visiting the Jets at the Meadowlands. Aaron, this game will be decided by a number of key matchups. Is there any that you have your eye on?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that Kirk Cousins is not the most fleet of foot. And I think when you look at this Jets matchup, and I remember having a similar conversation when Kirk got his first start of the season against the Miami Dolphins, and looking at their edge rushers and Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, and basically if they can get pressure on the quarterback, that could be a problem for the Atlanta Falcons offense, just because if Kirk's first read is not there, all he can really do at this point is check the ball down. Now, in fairness, like if you're checking the ball down to Bijan Robinson, like that can still be an explosive play. There has been a number of like 50-yard touchdowns from Bijan just taking a check down or turning it into a 30-plus yard play or something like that. So that still can be an asset for the Falcons. But when I look at this Jets defense, they trade Quinnen Williams, they trade Sauce Gardner. They still have Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald. I think both of those guys are still really good edge rushers, and they're facing a pair of offensive tackles in Atlanta. Jake Matthews is a very good left tackle, but he can be susceptible at times to spin moves, which I've seen Will McDonald pull off, as well as bull rushes. And Elijah Wilkinson, who has basically been replacing Caleb McGarry all season long at right tackle, has basically been on the struggle bus for the majority of the season. And going up against a guy like Jermaine Johnson, who has a very effective bull rush as well as other moves, to me is just tailor-made to give Wilkinson problems all day. And so if the Jets can get pressure on the quarterback with Kirk Cousins, and that could lead to some problems in this Falcons passing game not being as effective, particularly, and as we're recording this, we don't quite know the status of Drake London, but I'm not particularly optimistic at this stage that he's going to play this Sunday, based off of the sort of fickle nature of PCL sprains that typically aren't 1 week injuries, like the Falcons are suggesting they are. So we'll see on that front. That will be something that we'll keep an eye on as the week unfolds. But without the Falcons go-to #1 receiver, with the Jets being able to get pressure, I think that could, do a lot to throw a wrench in whatever the Falcons' plans as a passing attack would be.
That's a great matchup. I have a little different spot on the Lions. I'm going with Harrison Phillips and Jawan Briggs against Bijan Robinson. So now that Quinnen Williams has been traded, the Jets' 2 starting tackles on the defensive side of the ball are Phillips, who they acquired from the Minnesota Vikings at the end of the preseason in a trade, and Briggs, who they acquired from the Cleveland Browns at the end of the preseason in a trade. At the time they made those trades, Phillips made more sense to me than Briggs because Phillips has had a long career in the NFL. The Jets needed some help as a run stopper. But I have to say, I think both of these trades have worked well for the Jets. Briggs was a 7th-round pick a year ago by Cleveland, and he just kind of got caught in a numbers game there. He's strong. He's big. And he's actually started to come on a little bit as a pass rusher the last couple of weeks. I don't want to get ahead of myself and declare him, the Jets' future starter, because we know that a couple of good games aren't necessarily indicative that you're guaranteed to be part of the team going forward. But I've liked what I've seen from him. The Jets did a good job last week. They lost in Baltimore, but they bottled up a very talented run game with the Baltimore Ravens. These interior guys, neither of them is Quinnen Williams, but they can hold the point of attack up the middle. And I think if the Jets want to have any chance of winning this game, they have to be able to contain Bijan Robinson. I think if Bijan Robinson has a big game, it's very difficult to see the Jets having a path to win. And there are lots of guys who need to step up to contain Bijan Robinson. We can talk about the linebackers also, Jamie Sherwood and Quincy Williams. But I think it starts in the middle up front with Phillips and Briggs.
Yeah, I think a similar situation is the flip side with the Falcons defense, where the Falcons have really struggled to stop the run this year. And I think keeping Breece Hall contained, I think, is going to be their best plan of action to slow down this Jets offense. No offense to Tyrod in the passing game, but I'm not too worried about that area given how good the Falcons pass defense has been this year. But their run defense has been vulnerable. Now, it's been better the last 2 games. They haven't given up over 100 yards the last 2 weeks to Carolina and New Orleans. They've been much better on first downs, stopping the run, only allowing about 2.5 yards per carry on first downs. And that's going to be key for this team to keep Breece Hall in check. And then sort of the other flip side on the defense in terms of matchups is, will the Falcons utilize a 4-man rush? And they were very successful doing it last week against the Saints. Or will they get back to being that blitz-heavy team? They've been the most blitz-happy team in the NFL this season. And I think that makes sense going up against Tyrod, because you look at some of the numbers according to Next Gen Stats, he's basically been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league when dealing with the blitz. I think bottom 3 in terms of EPA per play against the blitz, alongside guys like Cam Ward and JJ McCarthy and those types of guys. And so it's like, oh, well, they're vulnerable to the blitz, but I think the Falcons at the same time want to see if they can get reliable pressure with 4 like they did a week ago. So that will be an interesting wrinkle in the game plan. Which do they lean on? They'll probably play it conservative in the first half and see what is working, and then they'll either ratchet up that blitz in the second half, which has been the norm for them, or will they rely on the 4-man rush? But I think stopping the run and what is their game plan when it comes to slowing down this passing attack? Do they rely on a 4-man rush and a blitz are going to be 2 key matchups that I'm looking at for the Falcons defense going up against this Jets offense.
So I'll tell you my last matchup, and it's as much about the future of the Jets as it is this game. And that's John Metchie, a receiver the Jets just acquired at the trade deadline from the Philadelphia Eagles versus D. Alford. Metchie has actually started to come on the last couple of weeks. He was a 2nd-round pick of Houston a few years back, and really incredible adversity he's faced in his career. He ended his college career at Alabama, as I'm sure a lot of fans remember, with a serious knee injury, then was diagnosed with leukemia as a rookie, which caused him to miss his rookie year. And then kind of got caught in numbers games in Houston and Philadelphia. So the Jets got him as a throw-in in a trade they made with Philadelphia for Michael Carter II. He was kind of low on the Eagles depth chart, and the Jets receiver room after Garrett Wilson, who will miss this game with a knee injury, was very weak. So he's gotten an opportunity to play. He's had 9 catches the last 2 games. I think he might be starting to blossom into the go-to guy in this Jets offense, which speaks volumes about where the offense is right now, where the passing game is right now. But also he's showing signs that, maybe he can be a contributor going forward. So I think he's going to be an important part of the Jets passing game this week. But I think as much as anything for the Jets, when you're at this stage of the rebuild, you're also focusing on contributions and what they tell you about what a player might be able to contribute going forward. So I think not just for this game, but for the rest of the year, Metchie is going to be a guy Jets fans are going to be focused on.
Yeah, I think I've noticed Metchie. He's popped a couple of times in the recent games that I've watched. So I'll be curious to see how the Falcons deal with that.
All right, well, you've now heard the big storylines around the Jets and Falcons. We've given you the key matchups. And you're on our Locked On crossover show. We're going to give you the keys to victory. What did the Jets need to do to win this game? What did the Falcons need to do to win this game? That's ahead. You're on the Locked On Podcast Network. Very happy Thanksgiving to Jets fans and Falcons fans. And thank you for making Locked On Jets and Locked On Falcons your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. I'm John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, alongside Aaron Freeman, the host of Locked On Falcons, getting you ready for this weekend's game between the Jets and the Falcons Sunday at MetLife Stadium. Aaron, Falcons are having a disappointing season. So are the Jets. If the Falcons are going to win this game, what's one thing you think needs to happen?
I think everything they do is predicated off of their ability to get off to a fast start. It has been a running gag on Locked On Falcons that basically you watch the first two offensive series to know if the Falcons are going to play well today. If they are able to move the ball and score on either one of their first two offensive series, it's like, okay, they'll be in this game. If they don't, then it's like, oh, well, better pack it up, go rake some leaves, go make the pie, get some leftovers or whatever, go check out. You got better things to do this Sunday with the Atlanta Falcons. And, they built their defense to play with a lead. As I said, it's not a great run defense. Their best run defense is their ability to get up early and force teams to have to abandon the run by playing catch up. So that's a big part of it, as well as their ability to dial up that pass rush, particularly in the second half. They've been very effective doing that, whether it's via the blitz or the four-man rush that they did last week against the Saints. And so I think the fast start is always going to be a big key to victory for the Atlanta Falcons. They have been overwhelmingly a front-running team this season. And so if they can get off to a fast start against the Jets, I think that allows them to dictate all the things that they want to do there.
All right. Well, since you gave a running gag on Locked On Falcons, I'll give you a running gag from Locked On Jets. And it'll be exciting because with Falcons fans will hear this for the first time. So I'll finally have a new audience for this. The Jets need to use Breece Hall better. Breece Hall's having a good season. I don't really understand some of the ways he's being utilized, though. He's frequently coming off the field on third downs. The Jets are using Isaiah Davis, a second-year guy they picked at day 3 last year, as their third down back. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me because Breece Hall is, first of all, explosive. Second of all, he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield, and you don't really have a lot of weapons elsewhere on the offense. So on the most critical downs, and I know he's a running back, I know he's probably not going to be the featured guy in most passes, but you're taking your most explosive playmaker off the field. And what Breece Hall struggles with sometimes are running between the tackles. So if you want to give Breece Hall a rest, it should happen on the early downs when you're trying to run a more physical run game. It shouldn't be on the money downs where he's your best player and where it fits his strengths. And Isaiah Davis is also a bigger, more suited to be a guy who's more suited to be a power back. So I don't really understand the way the Jets are dividing the snaps between Davis and Hall right now. I think that both players could be utilized better if Davis saw the field on more early snaps and Hall was on the field on third down. And this also speaks to Jets not really utilizing Hall's abilities as a receiver enough. They finally started throwing him the ball last week in the fourth quarter after they were behind. There was one drive where he had 2 catches for 55 yards. And this comes after weeks where he's kind of been an afterthought in the passing game. So I think the Jets just have to use Breece Hall in a way that maximizes his skills better.
Yeah. Like I said, he's the one guy that, like, if he could go off, is the thing that can potentially win the Jets this game, in my humble opinion. So I think we'll see if the Jets can do a better job, but it will be, from the Falcons' perspective, their focus should be on trying to limit him as much as possible. The other thing I'll point out, turnovers are always key with the Atlanta Falcons. In the Raheem Morris era, they are 9-2 when they have a positive turnover margin, so they get more takeaways and giveaways. They're 1-10 when they have a negative turnover margin. They're 2-4 when it's neutral. So basically, turnovers are the key. And I know the Jets don't create turnovers, but everybody has their get-right game against the Atlanta Falcons. And given Kirk Cousins and his propensity to turn the football over since he's been in Atlanta, I feel like this is going to be the week where the Jets finally get that interception, especially if they can get Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald to collapse a pocket, and then Kirk kind of panics and throws it up over the middle to somebody, and it's a tip pass. Like, I feel like this is going to be the week. So I think the Jets will break that curse, whatever you want to call it, this week with an interception.
I don't think it's possible to put it more diplomatically. The Jets struggles getting turnovers than you just did. They have one for the first one turnover all season long, and they have 0 interceptions all season long. And I think maybe we could file this under great minds think alike, but I think that the Jets have to take advantage if Kirk Cousins puts the ball into danger. There are a million reasons right now the Jets only have 2 wins on the season. One of them, and this is something I say a lot on Locked On Jets, is when you are the less talented team, you have to make big plays and you have to avoid big mistakes. And that means, especially when your offense is struggling the way the Jets offense has struggled, you have to give that unit short fields. Jets defense has not been doing that. They have not been forcing turnovers. So an offense that struggles anyway is not getting the short fields it needs to put points on the board. On some level, I don't think you can get this deep into the season, only have 1 turnover without there being some bad luck. I mean, the Jets' fumble recovery rate is just ludicrous. At some point, like, I would imagine that's going to even out. At some point, it's really difficult to get to Thanksgiving weekend without an interception. I think there's some bad luck involved with that, but also guys just need to make plays. There have been opportunities to make turnovers this season. I mean, you go back to week 1 where the Jets dropped 2 interceptions off Aaron Rodgers in the second half. If either of those are made, they probably beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. So there's lots of struggles with the Jets defense this year. The most inexplicable one has been the ludicrous rate they have at forced turnovers. And I think that, that could be something that could propel the Jets to a victory if they finally get a game where they're able to get a couple turnovers.
Well, I don't trust the Falcons, so I think this might be the week. Everybody has a get-right game against the Atlanta Falcons. Bryce Young hadn't thrown for like over 200 yards all season long and goes for almost 450 against the Falcons. This has been the theme in Atlanta this season, where whatever's been ailing you, and the Jets, it's that turnover streak. It always gets snapped against the Falcons.
All right. I'll give you one other key that I have for the Jets that is probably counterintuitive. And I think this might raise some eyebrows from both Jets fans and Falcons fans. I think the Jets should come out this game throwing the football. And you might look at the Jets passing game versus having Breece Hall to hand to. You might look at the Falcons defense, which I believe has been better against the pass than the run this year. But last week, the Jets came out and ran the ball heavily early against the Baltimore Ravens. And it just did not work because I think everybody knew that the Jets were going to come out running the ball. The Ravens were selling out against the run. And I think that to be able to establish the run, first you have to put the threat of the pass out there. And I think one thing the Jets have struggled with this year is when your passing game's struggling, it's very easy to get caught in the trap where we have to run the ball the whole time. Really, the only way to get your offense going is to start throwing on rundowns, because it's easier to throw the ball when the other team's expecting to run. Now, do the Jets have the pieces to throw the ball effectively? I'm not entirely sure. I don't know that it's going to work, but I think that if the Jets are going to win this game, they're going to have to throw effectively. And even though it's kind of leaning into their weakness and leaning into the strength of the Falcons defense, I just don't see a path where the Jets are going to be able to run the ball at the rate they were running it in the early part of the game against the Baltimore Ravens and having success. So I think that it's not something that I'm convinced is going to work, but I think if the Jets are going to win, it's something they're going to have to be able to do effectively.
Yeah, it's the zig when everybody expects you to zag, and that could be effective. Again, I think over the long haul, that plays to the Falcons' strength, as you mentioned. But if they can come out throwing and get maybe an explosive play, get a missed tackle or somewhere in the Falcons on the second level or something, and get an explosive play and maybe get early on the scoreboard early, that could throw a wrinkle into whatever the Falcons are doing.
Yeah, I think you made an interesting point about the Falcons getting off to a fast start. The Jets need to avoid the Falcons getting off to a fast start, because this is not an offense that's built to come back. You don't want to get into a situation where you have to throw it, because those are the situations where this Jets offense is really going to have issues. You can't get behind multiple scores early, because Jets just don't have enough firepower on offense outside of Breece Hall. Even when Garrett Wilson is healthy, and I think Garrett Wilson's a fantastic number one receiver, he just doesn't have the supporting cast. I mean, we're talking maybe Metchie can show he's a part of the solution going forward, but there just aren't enough weapons on this Jets offense if they get off to a slow start. So I think your key's absolutely right for the Falcons, because if the Falcons get off to a fast start, the Jets are in big trouble.
Yeah. Watching the film, I'm like, oh, Alan Lazard and Josh Reynolds, and these are NFL wide receivers, but you wouldn't be able to tell watching this Jets offense these last couple of weeks.
Right. I think they're backup NFL wide receivers who are starters for the Jets.
Yeah.
Anyway, Aaron, great chatting with you. I want to wish you and your family a very happy Thanksgiving, and want to wish a happy Thanksgiving to all you Jets fans and Falcons fans listening to our show today. Please travel safe if you're hitting the road. And be sure to tune in to Locked On Jets and Locked On Falcons tomorrow. Our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network is your team every day, and we live it. I'm John Butchko signing off for Locked On Jets alongside Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons. Hope you enjoyed our show today, and if you did, we'll have more content tomorrow getting you ready for the New York Jets versus the Atlanta Falcons.